Man versus machine, a professional translator versus the online Google Translate tool. The Federal Association of Interpreters and Translators, or BDU, opened the doors of its national office in Berlin for this extraordinary press event. The reason for the contest: Google Translate is certainly popular, but how good is it really? Can an experienced translator like Ralph Lemster translate a current newspaper article from English to German better than Google Translate? It's business as usual for the state-certified translator. This isn't any different from a regular job. It's a relatively typical part of business for a financial translator, having to translate text like this, even under a tight deadline. No sweat, really. After just a few seconds, Google Translate spits out its work. But is the translation accurate? The text will now be checked by Uwe Reinke, Professor of Language and Translation Technology at Cologne University of Applied Sciences. After 20 minutes, Ralph Lemster also presents his translation. Both texts are then analysed. The result is clear and hardly surprising. I can't say I'm really surprised. When it comes to translating things into German, a system like Google Translate always has a relatively tough time coping with complex sentence structures and more complicated sentences. What we've seen here is that while shorter sentences are semi-intelligible, I can give you an example of how a more complicated sentence is translated. The German text turns out to be a rather meaningless string of words. The grammatical structure is wrong, and it is hard to make out any sense at all. I have to admit that I didn't really understand much of that. It also isn't exactly fun trying to understand what's going on there. Of course, an element of fun isn't what fast translations are always aiming for, but the intelligibility factor should at least be there. That is to say, the first priority must be about relaying the most important information. I don't think that is what we have here. That's why Ralph Lemster does not see translation tools like Google Translate as a threat to professional translators. For two reasons. Firstly, as we saw here today, Google Translate isn't capable of accurately capturing context, background, or even industry terminology in some instances. Secondly, in my experience, customers appreciate it when the text they provide is reviewed, when we can provide feedback on the text, and software like this isn't capable of doing that. For Andre Lindemann, president of the BDU, this test yet again demonstrated the major weaknesses of online translators like Google Translate. For personal use, Google Translate can absolutely be a useful tool and act as an initial point of orientation, but we recommend that Google Translate only be used to translate things into a language that the user knows. Otherwise, users can't identify mistakes, and misconceptions can ensue. In business contexts, however, Google Translate is completely unsuitable, and one thing is crystal clear. Confidential documents should never be translated with Google Translate. Nobody knows where the data is going to end up. Conclusion: translation engines such as Google Translate are still just a quick fix if you are in a hurry. Those seeking an accurate and professional translation still have to rely on human intelligence.